So, a hyperbola is one of the conic sections that most students have not encountered formally before. Unlike circles na na-discuss nung grade 10 and parabolas nung grade 9, its graph consists of two unbounded branches that extend in opposite directions. It is misconception that each branch is a parabola. This is not true, as parabolas and hyperbolas have very different features. Okay, so let's begin. Hyperbola. So, ito yung tsura ng hyperbola. So, meron ditong dalawang parabola dyan. Mukhang parabola. And kung mapapansin, meron tayong tinatawag dito na transverse axis, kung saan andun yung center at andun din yung mga vertex. So, ang tawag natin doon is transverse axis. Okay? Next, kung meron tayong transverse axis, meron din tayong tinatawag na conjugate axis. So, si transverse axis saka yung conjugate axis, makakreate sila ng parang isang imaginary rectangle. So, later on gagawin natin yun pag nag-graph na tayo. And, as usual, yung distance ng vertex kay center is A units. Okay, hindi pa rin siya nagbabago. Yung distance ng focus kay center is C units. Hindi pa rin siya nagbabago. So, hanggang sa kabila. So, yung dalawang focus or yung foci ay C units from the center. Yung B naman natin, yun ay kalahati ng ating conjugate axis. Okay? So, yung ating transverse axis is 2A. Conjugate axis natin is 2B. Okay? Halos yun lang naman. And, kung mapapansin, meron tayong dalawang line dyan. Ang tawag natin dyan is asymptotes. Okay? Ano yung asymptotes? Asymptotes, those are the curves closer and closer to a certain line but never be intersect. In short, ito yung mga curve na closer and closer but never be together. Okay? So, parang kayo ng crush mo. Getting closer and closer pero hindi pwede. Okay? So, let's continue. Let's have the definition. Hyperbola is a set of points in a plane whose distances to two fixed points in the plane have a constant difference, and the two fixed points are called foci. So we have theorem 1.4.1, standard equation of hyperbola centered at the origin. So a hyperbola with equation x squared over a squared minus y squared over b squared equals to 1 has x-axis as its transverse axis and the origin as its center, where a and b are greater than 0. Also, a hyperbola, equation natin ay y squared over a squared minus x squared over b squared equals to 1 has x-axis as its transverse axis and the origin as its center, where again, a and b is greater than 0. Kung papansin, sir, magkamukha lang naman yan. So, hindi yan magkamukha, no? So, tingnan natin itong mabuti. X squared yung positive. Dito, y squared yung positive. Now, kung mapapansin, yung value ng a and b hindi nagbago. Kasi yung A, yun yung palaging positive. Okay? So, pag in-arrange natin in standard form, yung A natin, yung palaging nasa positive side. Okay? So, palaging nasa una, siya yung palaging positive. Yung B, siya lagi nandun sa ilalim ng may negative sign. Okay? So, tandaan mabuti, yung A ay nasa palaging positive. Dun kasi sa ellipse, yung A yung malaking number. Dito, yung A yung palaging positive. Okay? So, let's have an example. So, ito yung magiging itsura kapag nag-graph tayo. So, merong focus. Ang focus, ang layo niyan ay C units. Yung vertex ay A units. Yung ating conjugate axis ay B units from the center. And we have the asymptotes. Okay, so yung center nito is at the origin. And yung transverse axis is horizontal. Or simply, ito yung x-axis. Now, in equation, yung x-axis is y is equals to 0. Okay? So, another is this one. Yung center natin is at the origin ulit, while yung ating transverse axis is yung vertical line or yung y-axis. Yung equation ng y-axis natin is x is equals to 0. Okay? So, tandaan mabuti, yung A yung palaging nasa positive. Para hindi kayo maligaw. Yung A yung palaging nasa positive. Next, theorem 1.4.2. Standard equation of hyperbola centered at h, k, or centered at any point on the plane. A hyperbola with equation quantity x minus h squared over a squared minus y minus k squared over b squared equals to 1 has transverse axis at y equals to k. So, medyo familiar na tayo dito kasi nagawa na natin to before. So, kunin natin yung nandun sa may negative part. So, yung minus, kunin natin yung may negative part na yun. So, equate natin sa 0, then solve for y. Or simply change the sign lang, yung kasama nung y. Okay, so y equals to k. Next, pag naman ganito yung ating hyperbola, y minus k squared, yung y naman yung positive, over a squared, minus x minus h squared over b squared equals to 1. Yung transverse axis niya is, again, yung may minus. So, change the sign lang to. So, we have x equals to h. And centered at h, k. Where a and b are greater than 0. So, medyo din tayo mahihirapan dito kasi ginagawa na natin to nung ellipse. So, medyo familiar na tayo dun sa mga transverse axis. Yun nga lang, sa ellipse, meron tayong major and minor axis. Dito, transverse and conjugate axis. So, ito yung mga itsura nila. Pag ginraph natin. So, yung center niya, tandaan, yung A nasa laging positive yan. Center natin is h, k. While yung ating transverse axis is y equals to k. Okay? So, sa transverse axis, din matatagpuan yung vertex and yung focus. Also, ganda sa pagpababa. So, center at h, k, and transverse axis natin is x equals to h. Tandaan, yung A ay palaging nasa positive side. So, gagawin natin to sa mga susunod na araw. So, be ready. Now, ano yung relationship between A, B, and C? Yung sa ellipse kasi ay A squared minus B squared equals to C squared. Kung natatandaan. So, dito, ano ang relationship nung A na yan? Distance ng vertex, yung C, distance ng focus, at yung B, yung ating conjugate axis. So, the relationship between A, B, and C is given by the equation, familiar kayo dito, A squared plus B squared equals to C squared. So, parang Pythagorean theorem lang, no? Yun nga lang, hindi siya Pythagorean theorem. Kasi ito, i-apply natin sa hyperbola. Okay? So, in this case kasi, mas mahaba yung C kumpara kay A. Kaya A squared plus B squared equals to C squared. And we're done.